outside the voice of the Northeast, which behind me here is LMFM. As normal, we're on a busy road. We have all our volunteers either side of the road with our information drop, and as ever we're peaceful. We're just here to give the information, and then we really would encourage people to find out their own information. Now let's just take a little journey back to 2019, and I can speak as a Meath Louth person when Michael Reid, now deceased, and his team of people broke it to the people of County Louth in tandem with the national media, paid media, that this scandemic, this COVID-demic had now hit the whole world, and we're all going to die, apparently. This is what they told us. And in fact, many of these so-called broadcasters, journalists, I would have said personally, took absolute pleasure in telling the people that we're all going to die. So what was the solution? The solution was that we had to lock up our grannies, lock up our children, lock up ourselves inside our homes. So what happened inside these homes? Of course, these journalists didn't have to stay at home. No, the journalists came into work. So all these ears and eyes of very vulnerable people who were genuinely very frightened couldn't go outside. So what did they have on? And I can verify as an ex-healthcare worker, as I supported people in their homes, the one radio station the County Meath people had on, of course, was LMFM. And Michael Reid, now deceased, had played a huge part in people's lives. They really trusted him. Very vulnerable people. And of course, Luke O'Neill was talking about these very vulnerable people. These were the ones now that would have to be locked up. And Michael Reid at the time encouraged, and I wouldn't say encouraged, that's a bit polite, enforced every day and reinforced, and his next presenters every day reinforced that we must lock up, we mustn't go outside the door. You know, there was no mention of taking a healthy walk, there was no mention of maybe raise your vitamin C levels. So once the vaccine centres opened up, of course, here we go again, politicians were putting on extra buses because they couldn't get the older people quick enough to the vaccine centres, so they put on extra buses, Heather Tobin. And of course, from this angle, from the voice of the Northeast, Michael Reid, deceased, and his brilliant journalists informed the people morning, noon and night the advantages of this vaccine. And then, of course, RTE at the same time, all working together, had Luke O'Neill and, of course, all those cohorts in Dublin, because they couldn't get down to County Louth, of course. No, they stayed in Dublin to encourage all the vulnerable and the believers in Dublin that they too had to get to the vaccine centres. And what transpired? And that's why we're here. Because for 2 years, this war of information, disinformation, was waged on the people of Ireland. And the people, the voices that spoke up and said, well, look, can we at least look at this? Can we at least look at the data? People like Michael Reid, deceased, and his cohort of brilliant, again, journalists, I use that term very lightly, called people that wanted to use a little bit of research and wanted to use their own sort of cognitive abilities. This station, I'll give you a lovely view of this station. This station called people like that they wanted them rounded up and put into camps for their own good. Now, unfortunately, we did look for that particular piece of information on their website, but it has been removed. We can no longer get that piece of information, but I can tell people, if they trust me, I can verify that Michael Reid, deceased, and the rest of the journalists did say these things, because I actually rang into the radio station and they lost my call. So in 2024, LMFM and all the other criminal media, thank you, we always get the great support, all the other criminal media, but we're dealing with LMFM today. And these people have had this information since 2021. And the question we have to ask ourselves, how many people, how many young, old and in the middle have lined up for this vaccine that was never a vaccine but a bioweapon, according to Pfizer's own data, not our data. And still today, in 2024, in November, All Souls Day, and we must remember our fallen souls. And in 2024, November, LMFM have been given the opportunity this morning to come out and speak to somebody, at least give, some acknowledgement to people like Ethna and other people that are standing here this morning. And instead of having the courage of their convictions, they all ran upstairs. So what I'd really appreciate and ask people to do, not because it's WakeUpéiRe and not because it's me or Barry or Katrina or whoever, Mars, I'd ask people, let them know today, and I have the footage, that all staff have ran upstairs. They're taking the money, they're still talking about the boosters, they're running the HSE propaganda still on their radio station. And yet they've run upstairs, these brilliant so-called journalists, when asked a very, very simple question from a very simple person like myself. So ask your family to draw their own conclusions from that. So look, I really appreciate everybody coming here. It's been fantastic. And all we're doing here today is a peaceful info drop. And again, to remind the Voice of the North East of their journalistic duty.